Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you. How are you? It's Wednesday, and I have to admit, I'm not. I'm feeling about the same. I'm in my COVID closet because you know COVID's still around, right? I mean, it's not going away. I mean, you know that, right? I mean, they and I want to lead with that because I feel like if we don't talk about it, then we're going to think, oh, we don't have to worry. You got to worry about it. And I am going out to see some people very not with not I mean not taking business meetings and that kind of thing. I'm still zooming. I'm the boomer zoomer. And but I am going to do something in August. And I'm going to take an airplane again. I take an airplane like once every couple months when I feel like, oh, maybe the timing's right. I did get a fourth shot, so I'm four-shotted, so that's good. But I want to begin this. We're going to talk about other things. We're going to talk about the racism at the San Francisco School Board. I mean, there's a charge of racism. An Asian American said something. She was accused of racism. Going to talk about that instance. Going to talk about a hate attack on a San Francisco politician. Well, flyers that are casting aspersions about his good nature, racist in the flyers, and you got to hear about that because if you think, oh yeah, we don't have to worry about that kind of thing. Yes, we do, as Asian Americans. I want to talk about this violence study that came out that is especially chilling, and then what Joe Biden said about the climate emergency. We're all hot. Millions of people, not just in America, but all around the world. We're hot. I'm going to talk about how Biden didn't exactly declare a climate emergency formally, but he's edging toward that. And I'll play a little bit about what the president said. Also, the All-Star game, because it was kind of exciting. I wish they would have showed more Shohei than not. I wish they wouldn't have cut away from the game when the game was exciting. But when the game was boring and all this, how can you be a scrub, right? But if you're like a backbencher in an all-star game, they mic those people up. It was kind of amusing. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But I do want to begin with the COVID bit because, the subtitle of this show is WDAAAT. What does an Asian American think? They never ask us. But I think it's important that on these polls that we weigh in and just get a sense. What does an Asian American think? This is a national poll, Axios Ipsos Coronavirus Index poll, published on Wednesday. 78% of Americans surveyed believe that COVID-19 will not disappear in their lifetimes. What do you think? I think it's just gonna be like a wave. It's gonna be in the system. We're gonna get variations, and it's gonna go up and it's gonna go down, and we're gonna live with it. So I don't think it's gonna disappear either. So I guess I'm with the majority. Half of the respondents said they had or suspected they had COVID-19 at some point, while a third said they knew someone who has been reinfected. People are less concerned about getting sick now than they were in the past. I think that's a mistake. You should be concerned. 1 in 3 Americans believe the pandemic is over. But the respondents are divided along party lines. 48%, if you're a Republican, you think it's over, compared to just 9% of Democrats who believe it's over. Look, it's not over. If you're Asian American, it's not over. In fact, I think I saw someone say something about don't put Asian Americans in masks. Asian Americans should mask. I don't think there's any, I mean, it doesn't make you any more of a target than if they see your full face. I mean, I don't understand the logic of people saying, "Oh, don't show Asian Americans in mass." Well, we're a racist society, but we should deal with it, or they should deal with the fact that Asian Americans are also very conscious about COVID and are going to wear masks. So this is a dilemma. A lot of people say, "Oh, don't show any Asian Americans in masks." No, I think for mask, we'll shout out about how we're concerned about what's going on with COVID and about what's not going on with COVID. I mean, here in California, the most Asian American state, COVID-19 cases rose 36% over the past month. And the positivity rate, I notice in the state is about 16, 17%. And it's just, we're going to have to be on our toes, guarding ourselves from reinfection, guarding ourselves from spreading. If we don't think we have it, or maybe if you're testing, you'll know if you have it or not before you go out in public. So test, make sure you're testing, and I think as a precaution, wear a mask. That's one thing that I noticed with the Dodger Stadium images. I didn't see a whole lot of masks. I would be masked. I'm sorry. I think you got to do it. And I think you got to do it for the duration. And the duration seems like it's going to be a long time. But I would not leave my guard down. I would not leave my guard down. That talk show implement shows you that this is an official talk show. It is actually, I call it the micro talk show of the AAPI and the AAXs. Our micro talk show, because we have this thing, right? WDAAAAT. What does an Asian American think? You see the talk shows, you don't see any Asian Americans, but we're in the news. We're in there lurking. So I do this show, this micro talk show. Not that you have to be Asian American to listen, but you have to get my perspective. My perspective as an Asian American journalist, commentator. Here I am, 2 p.m. Pacific live. We do a little lagniappe, a little extra in the beginning, and then at 2 o'clock Pacific, we go on and we talk about the news as it pertains to Asian Americans from, like I said, from my perspective here in California, but really it should be a clarion call for all Asian Americans that stuff is happening to us and we should be on alert, or at least be conscious about these stories. First one, let me also mention that you can get my my columns. I'm on the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund blog, and yeah, I mean, I've been writing for them since 2010. I wrote about the fist bump, right? It's still, I mean, when you understand the fist bump, you'll know why Biden suddenly is really, really eager to declare some kind of climate emergency. And maybe he wouldn't if he had stronger proposals to end climate, but then he has big obstacles like Senator Joe Manchin, who's in the pockets of the oil companies, and he also has to deal with Republicans who are dragging their feet saying, oh, there's no climate change. Yeah, millions of Americans are threatened by the heat, millions in Europe, and these are the climate deniers, no different than election deniers. They're the deniers, and they need to be called out. You need to speak out. Catch my blogs on the ALDEF website and see my perspective. Tomorrow, you've been hearing about the January 6 hearings, prime time, 5 p.m. Pacific tomorrow. You want to see why it's important? Check out my column, Stephanie Murphy, talking about the last hearing. This is hearing 8 the one's going to take place tomorrow, hearing 7 last week. My response to that, you can see it on the Aldef blog. Also, I did about the deferred action on childhood arrivals and how we desperately need something to put childhood arrivals on a pathway to citizenship. I mean, the whole thing about immigration has been messed up because we haven't had new immigration reform. But check out my column there. I talk a little about Filipino history, a little about also because my dad he was undocumented. My dad was undocumented. He didn't need a green card though because he was an American national. He was a colonized Filipino born in the Philippines. He came here in 1928 and his arrival was on 7/11, July 11th. And I write about that on the blog. So check that out. Other things, I talk about Shinzo Abe, Highland Park and guns. New thing, the Highland Park mayor was in Congress today talking about guns and what's needed. And she said something that was really pretty clear. It's about getting assault weapons, getting combat weapons out of the hands of civilians. Look, if you're for the Second Amendment, all right, guns. Yeah, I get it. You want a handgun? Have a handgun. A combat weapon? No. Get the combat weapons out of civilian hands. Get them out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them because of mental instability, which effective red flag laws would identify. That solves a good deal of the problem. And the assault weapons ban, which was put into effect in 1994 by Senator Dianne Feinstein from California, because in fact, we had an assault weapons issue here in California, which instituted a ban in California that's still in place. They had a similar model assault weapons ban put forth in the U.S. It was allowed to sunset. The lobbyists defeated or kept a good law down, so to speak, and we've been without the assault weapons ban ever since. And we've had mass killings rise ever since. So see what my thoughts are on the blog. And one more, the row reversal. It's all there on the Aldef blog. So check it out. aaldef.org/blog. All right. So let's talk a little about racism in the San Francisco School District. This was a tough one. I saw this in the news yesterday. It was a little distressing because a school board member, Ann Sue, HSU, appointed by Mayor London Breed back in March, she made some statements about why Black and brown students had issues with education. She should have been more circumspect, or she should have been a little better prepared, because she was one of the replacement board members after 3 were recalled in November. So anything she was going to say was going to get jumped on and picked apart because she is seen as not a friend to diversity, because the other ones were seen as a friend to diversity. So the battle lines were drawn. Anyway, Ann Sue gets up. Here's what she said. She said that Black and brown students, their challenges in education was that they had, quote, unstable family environments and, quote, a lack of parental encouragement to focus on learning. Now, you might say, like on first blush, is that a racist statement? To say that Black and brown students have, quote, unquote, unstable family environments and, quote, unquote, lack of parental encouragement to focus on learning? Depends on how you say it. If you say, I have this study here, and this study shows that 50% or 60% of our students, and there's a way to say it. Like, you got evidence to say that? If you got evidence, you can say it. If you don't come out and say, here's why I say that, then it comes across as a generalization. And if you get generalizations, it means that, oh, you're saying that black students and brown students come from unstable family environments. All of them. Clearly wrong. You're saying that black and brown students have a lack of parental encouragement to focus on learning. All of them. Well, no, I didn't say all of them. I said some black and brown students. Sounds like you said all of them. And then, of course, you got the backlash, because this was the handpicked school board members by the African-American mayor, puts them in to take the place of the mostly BIPOC community members who were recalled, seen as recalled by primarily white and Asian voters in the November election. So what was the backlash? Well, they said that the comments were harmful, racist, repeated false ideas about black and brown parents, repeated stereotypes. And that's a key thing. When you repeat what can be viewed as stereotypical, not as, hey, look, this is connected to some kind of finding, then you're going to be branded as a racist. And I was surprised. I'm reading this from the San Francisco Chronicle. And even the Chronicle says, Chronicle editors determined that the comment met the publication's definition of racist because the remark employed stereotypes of racial or ethnic groups. It wouldn't have been a stereotype if she was saying, here's a study that says this about black and brown students and pathologies within society, the social pathologies that indicate low test scores or a lack of achievement in education. It wouldn't have been a stereotype. It would have been a data point. But instead, she made it a generalization. Generalizations are stereotypes, and was ripe for people who look at that as, you're on the school board and you're making these assumptions, these dangerous assumptions. Is this how we're going to get to where we want to go with members of the BIPOC community fully involved in public school education, which is really sometimes the only avenue to education, right? Public education. We got a person saying these assumptions. That's not good. I would not say it was racist. I would say it was misinformed. And here's what Sue had to say. She said, quote, this is on a Twitter. She said, I was trying to understand and address a serious problem and seek solutions. And in doing so, I said things that perpetuated biases already in the system. She said she understood how, quote, problems like generational poverty, food insecurity, and housing insecurity, which disproportionately affect our BIPOC families due to systemic racism and inequality, make it harder for children to learn, harder for families to function, harder for teachers to teach. My statements reflect my limited experiences and inherent biases. I made a mistake and I am deeply sorry. And it's a lesson for a neophyte politician at the school board level. You make that, and you got to be careful every which way. Now, it's one thing for a stupid comedian to say something. It's something for maybe even a stupid talk show host to say. But you're responsible for spending millions of public dollars tens of millions of public dollars to make education, public education work for everyone in San Francisco, the city and county, you have to be careful. And so I'm sorry it happened to Ann Sue, but Ann Sue now makes it possible for people to say, "Oh, Asians are racist. Asians are racist toward other people of color," which is wrong, but people are going to say that. And I hope people understand that she made a mistake and she apologized. But it does make it hard to say anything these days without making sure that T's are crossed and I's are dotted, because it's an unforgiving environment out there. And you will be seen and called for racism. I just think that there are some things that they're not necessarily truisms, but they're backed up by data that show that you have black and brown families that suffer from hardships in, economic inequities, in family cohesion. I mean, those are facts, not generalizations. But here's the thing that makes me more sensitive to both sides. I mean, I see the data points, but I also know that just because you're poor, just because you're brown and black, it doesn't mean you can't succeed in the best public education setting that San Francisco has to offer. I know, because that was me. I went to Everett. I think Everett, when I went there, was 80% black. I got straight A's. Okay, great. Why did I get straight A's? Because my parents, who were poor and brown, because they encouraged me? No. I mean, they encouraged me as much as parents could. I mean, they weren't doting on me. They didn't buy me tutors. They didn't do anything like that. I did it on my own. And I think that's the thing. Kids want to do it on their own, but they need guidance. And if they don't get it necessarily from parents, they need good teachers. That's where I think the school district has to come on board and say, look, we know these kids aren't just doomed because they're black or brown. They're doomed because they need more input. They need input from good teachers, good mentors. They need good input from other people of color who say, hey, look, let me show you the way. They need input from people who care. Because if they did that, if they got that, then you don't need, you can come from the worst family situation. You can come from a family situation where there's no father. Mother's working all the time. Mother doesn't talk. Doesn't matter. If there are replacement inputs telling that student you can succeed, you can survive that broken family situation, you can survive a poor economic. My family had no money. I mean, I think at most, it's by inflationary standards, it's even worse. But if we made $400 a month, we were able to pay the rent. It was a different San Francisco, I know, when I was growing up. But we were renters. We were poor. This is the problem when Sue's statement gets taken out of context. And when you start to stereotype and say, oh, this happens to all blacks, all browns, all poor people. They're like this. No. You can get an education, but you better make sure the inputs are coming to those kids, because they're young, and the smart ones, and even the ones who aren't so smart. Why aren't they not so smart? Because no one took the time to identify them and say, you're smart, you can do this. That's the truth. Someone said, "Oh, Emil, how come you did it?" Well, I was motivated on my own. I I did it on my parents were there to help. I mean, I was parented, but if I achieved, it was because of stuff I did, not what they did. And what I did is because I had good friends who were motivated. I followed them. I mean, if my friends who had parents who like prodded them to do their homework, I lived off them. So I think that's the lesson from Sue, the Sue, the Sue instance here. Not to say, "Oh, you're racist." You know, she didn't intend to be racist. She did make a racist statement, but it doesn't mean we can't learn something from this. Like, what really is the issue? When schools start stereotyping and say all brown kids, all black kids, because they're all from the same background kind of thing, and they can't learn. BS. They can learn. Do your job as teachers, do your job as educators, reach these kids. Need I bring up the stand and deliver example? Jaime Escalante, Garfield High, LA, these poor kids, brown kids, no one gave them a chance. Can they do calculus? Everyone said, no, you're in dummy math, you're in general math. How many times did I see that when I was going to Everett, when I was in elementary and junior high in San Francisco? Jaime Escalante said, you're learning calculus. You're going to put in the time, you're going to do the work, you're going to get it. He taught them, stand and deliver. Edward James Olmos movie. If you haven't seen it, see it. Education can work. I know educators in the Valley stuck with the same kind of thing. Mostly brown. Mostly brown. Latinx, not many blacks, but some. But all BIPOC type communities where people give up unless you are a super educator. Then you don't give up. Then you see them, you don't believe the assumptions, you don't believe the stereotypes. You can get people to learn. You can increase test scores. In the Valley, it's been done. It happens. And if it doesn't happen in places like San Francisco, it's because the educators are at fault. And that's the problem when you have a school board, which is honchoing over the educators, when the school board has the purse strings and they're supposed to know these things, it's disheartening. So remember that. The bad thing about what Aunt Sue said was that she used the stereotype, she used a generalization. And we know just because you're poor, just because you're brown, doesn't mean you can't succeed. You can, and you can do it through public education. So, Aunt Sue says she's apologized. I think we can go on, but it says something about what's at stake at the San Francisco Board of Education and the San Francisco Unified Schools. You can have every school a Lowell. It makes it a little tougher because your students better be exposed to the best possible teachers. And that isn't happening. From what I've read, from what I've seen, you got to have those Jaime Escalantes in there who believe. They don't buy the stereotype. They don't buy the assumption. They believe these kids can learn. And that was what was hurting about Aunt Sue's comment, because it indicated that maybe they didn't believe these kids could learn. All right, so I want to transition to the other story that I saw San Francisco, I like to look at San Francisco from afar because I'm a native. I know San Francisco, and I see it from afar. I can see that, wow, school isn't, I mean, city's suffering. I don't know what's going to change things, the inequities, but it hurts me when I see this headline: San Francisco Supervisor Gordon Marr targeted with disturbing, dangerous flyers posted in Sunset District. That was tough. I know that Gordon Marr's a good guy. He's running. He tweeted online, talked about these flyers put up over the weekend. Not sure who put them up there, but some of them were just straight out of the right-wing playbook, right? Using phrases like communist pedophile, trying to mock Marr for saying he supports more drugs, more homelessness, the grooming of children, which is a kind of a pedophile kind of trope that's used by the right wing. Phrases like free money to crackheads, kick out the Chinese, bring in gangs. So Marr called them reactionary and ridiculous smears. And it's sad this is happening in the city that's supposed to know how, but that used to be the old phrase that you'd use, San Francisco, or to describe San Francisco, the city that knows how. Now it doesn't know how very much. So it's sad. It's an extreme form of bigotry. Here's what Marr tweeted. He said, "This community is under attack thanks to an emboldened far right and the politicians and candidates who stoke this bigotry and division, even in San Francisco. I have a simple message for them. We refuse to go backwards. We refuse to be divided or distracted." Now, I stand by Gordon Marr. Not for re-election. He's right. This is something that isn't really native to San Francisco. It's kind of something you see by a right wing, a far right that is emboldened by what you see in January 6th, what you see, the Trump election deniers who need division and bigotry to really propel them and to excite their crowd. It's not a majority, but it's enough to do damage, and it's enough to bully and to intimidate good people who get on the fence and don't know what to do, and they get turned off to the whole democratic process. I mean, that's what happens. And I just wish that Gordon Marr didn't have to see that, didn't have to experience it, because when it happens to someone on high, a leader, a member of the Board of Supervisors, it happens to all of us, not just those in San Francisco, but to every Asian American who dares to speak out, who dares to come forward and to take it on and to challenge, this kind of racist hate in flyers. I mean, this whole idea of being a groomer, a pedophile communist groomer. Oh my goodness. They're going after Gordon Marr. In San Francisco, where a Republican is really just a conservative Democrat who has a little more money. That's a Republican. Actually, a Republican now in San Francisco is a recent Chinese immigrant, recent meaning 10, 15 years, with money, who buys all cash houses in the Sunset. That's a Republican in San Francisco. And so for this person to attack Gordon Marr shows a lack of sense about where politics is in San Francisco. So anyway, the takeaway is, if it happens to Gordon Marr in San Francisco, Imagine if you're Gordon Marr running for board of supervisors or an elected position in Iowa, in any red state. This is intended to intimidate, and we're not going to stand for it. We are not going to stand for it. More power to Gordon Marr. All right, one other thing. It's just not the day that I checked the Chronicle and there are all these interesting stories, but there just happen to be. This is a nationwide study that was released by UC Davis's California Center for Firearm Violence Prevention. And it indicates some scary things about our country. And so this is a nationwide view. 1 in 5 Americans believe that violence can be at least sometimes justified to advance an important political objective. And half, 50% believe that a civil war is on the way in the next few years. Nationwide study, 8,200 respondents nationwide, conducted by UC Davis's California Center for Firearm Violence Prevention. It's scary. 1 in 5 believe that violence can sometimes be justified. This is why you got to get firearms, or you have to get combat weapons away from certain people, out of the hands of civilians. That's too many. 1 in 5. What does an Asian American think? That's too many. It should be 1 in 5 Americans believe violence. Sometimes that's too many. To advance an important political objective, that is too many. We need to get that number down. Less than half of that, 1 in 5. 1 in 5, 20%, we need to get it down to like in the low single digits if we want to feel safe. With the scarier number is that half believe that a civil war is on the way. Is that the lesson from January 6th? If more than half believe that a civil war is on the way, I think we're in trouble. What does an Asian American think? I think that number should be down to less than 20. That should be a number less than 20. It shows that people don't have much hope. It shows that people are scared. There's fear. And the only way to really combat fear is with a sense of love of country, a sense of love for each other, a sense of patriotism for each other. You're not going to get that. You're not going to get that if you look at January 6th and think that we can't avoid that again. You're not going to get that unless you have people coming together. Here's what one of the researchers, director of the California Center for Firearm Violence Prevention, said in the Chronicle, said, I had pretty dark expectations about what we would find with this survey because of the homework I had done getting ready for it, but the findings are darker than my worst case scenario, said Garen Wintermute. And another person, Rachel Kleinfeld, a fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for Peace, said that many people value having a strong leader over democracy. That was the other finding. They value a strong leader of democracy. That's the most worrisome statistic because it shows that the strong leader, that's why people saw Trump and were willing to back him. That's the scary part. 19% of the respondents strongly or very strongly agreed with the statement. If elected leaders will not protect American democracy, the people must do it themselves, even if it requires taking violent actions. That's scary. Now, there's one thing here that's sort of piqued my interest. The survey said there was significant support for replacement theory. You know, it's the belief that the gunman in Buffalo, Peyton Gendron, who killed 10 people, he believed in replacement theory. Nearly 1 in 5 respondents, 19% in this, disagreed with the statement that, quote, having more Black Americans, Latinos, and Asian Americans is good for the country. 20% disagreed with that. Just our luck, right? When we meet that 20%, 100% of the time. 20%, 19% disagreed with the statement, having more Black Americans, Latinos, and Asian Americans is good for the country. 41% agreed, including 16 who agreed strongly or very strongly, agreed with the idea that, quote, in America, native-born white people are being replaced by immigrants. That is scary. So now we got to worry about the 20% who disagree with the statement that having more Black Americans, Latinos, and Asian Americans is good for the country. And then that's just 20%. And then double that agreed with the idea that in America, native-born white people are being replaced by immigrants. We got to worry about all those people. Or we have to turn them around and make them see the error of their ways, because they're just flat out wrong. So this is a concern, right? I mean, what's happening in our schools in San Francisco, what's happening overall in our nation with that violence study. Hard to believe. 20%? What does an Asian... 20% said that they disagree with the statement that Blacks, you know, people of color, Asians were good for the country. When 20% say that, that number in a great diversity like America, that number should be more like, again, like at least single digits. At least half of that, I feel a little more comfortable. If it were like in the low single digits, like 1-2%, margin of error, 4 or 5%, 6% in the study, I can live with that. But when it's as high as 20, that is not good. We got our work cut out for us, folks. We got our work cut out for us. All right, let us switch to Joe Biden. And, you know, he was out there in Somerset, Mass. It's out there by New Bedford and in a part of Massachusetts, south of Boston, working class. They got coal plants. And he was there to announce that there's going to be a new cable company, not cable TV, but they're making cables, and it's going to be a clean type of setup. It's not going to be a situation where you're going to have to worry about your health and about coal. It's going to be good. And he said something that said, you know, he said, we're investing more than $4 billion in federal funding since I took office. He's talking about investment. He's talking about doing things to change industry, because he says, this is what Joe Biden says. He says,
when I think about climate change, and I've been saying this for 3 years, I think jobs. Climate change, I think jobs.
And he got a big applause for that. And that's the kind of talk that's going to get Republicans off their keisters to try to do something and join Democrats about climate change, because there was Biden announcing that, you know, there's going to be 100 wind turbines going up off the coast of Massachusetts and Rhode Island. They're going to put up these new plants replacing coal plants. And he said, you know, there's no one who's going to say, I miss the coal plants. Although that's a kind of opposition he's fighting, when Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, the biggest obstacle, Democratic Party, right? Biggest obstacle to Joe Biden's climate agenda, can't get the vote of Joe Manchin. And the other Republicans who are dragging their feet. But here's the thing about Biden. If he talks climate change equals jobs, that may be the winning formula. It's not, hey, it's hot outside, climate change, we got to change things to make things cool down. We got to save the earth. No one cares about saving the earth. But if it's all about jobs, climate change equals jobs, that may be a winning formula for Joe Biden. Here's more of what he said.
I've directed my administration to clear every federal hurdle and streamline federal permitting that brings these clean energy projects online right now and right away. And some of you have already come up and talked to me about it. And while so many governors and mayors have been strong partners in this fight to tackle climate change, we need all governors and mayors. We need public utility commissioners and state agency heads. We need electric utilities and developers to stand up and be part of the solution. Don't be a roadblock.
See, don't be a roadblock. He says you all have a duty right now to our economy and our competitiveness to the world. And then he got down to the nitty gritty.
That sounds like hyperbole, but it's not. It's real. Act boldly on climate. And so does Congress, which, notwithstanding the leadership of the men and women that are here today, has failed in its duty. Not a single Republican in Congress stepped up to support my climate plan. Not one.
And you should remember that. Remember that if you're thinking about becoming a Republican or are Republican. What is wrong with the Republican Party? You got Republican Party denying the election, the 2020 election, denying climate, and most Republicans deny the fact that Black, Indigenous, and people of color are becoming more dominant in our society. And so deny. But the climate, this is an issue that affects all of us. So here's Biden, where he didn't quite say formally that it's an emergency, but he was pretty semi-clear.
So let me be clear. Climate change is an emergency. And in the coming weeks, I'm going to use the power I have as president to turn these words into formal, official government actions through the appropriate proclamations, executive orders, and regulatory power that a president possesses.
So he got some cheers there, and he should have, but you got to hear it again straight from the horse. I mean, I know Biden's not popular. 64% say someone other than Biden, please. His approval rating's like 33 to 38%. But you know, he's the president we got. And considering that, he really isn't that bad. Here's what he said again.
Climate change is an emergency.
Climate change is an emergency. And he's doing it because, as he says, he wants to give us a fighting chance.
When it comes to fighting for climate change, I will not take no for an answer. I will do everything in my power to clean our air and water, protect our people's health, to win the clean energy future. This, again, sounds like hyperbole. Our children and grandchildren are counting on us. Not a joke. Not a joke. If we don't keep it below 1.5 degrees centigrade, we lose it all. We don't get to turn it around. And the world is counting on us. As this is the United States of America. When we put our hearts and minds to it, there's not a single thing beyond our capacity. I mean it. When we act together, and of all things we should be acting together on, it's climate. It's climate.
It's climate. It's hot. Millions of Americans it's over 100 degrees where I am. I got out the white shirt and t-shirt today. It's hot. Even here in my climate. It's a climate closet. It's also the COVID closet. I'm glad that Biden is getting there. He's getting to the point where he's like, come on, this is survival. But the Republicans are going to try to outlast him. Hey, you're not going to be around when any of this stuff gets implemented. But look at where the Republican Party is going. The Republican Party, well, the Supreme Court, the conservative leaning Supreme Court, they gutted the EPA's authority, gutted the prospects of future regulation when they had that decision that came down earlier this month or last month, June. I mean, I just think that what you have here is you have Biden trying to come back. He's got to be stronger. Let's see what happens the next couple of weeks. He called it an emergency. He says climate change is an emergency, and in the coming weeks is going to use his power as president to turn these words into a formal, official government action or actions. We need it. If he does it, are you there? Because the polls show that the people are there. Let's see what happens. Okay, tomorrow we have the January 6th, the 8th hearing. I'll write something on the Aldip blog for tomorrow about my thoughts. 177 minutes. That's about 3 Emil Amok takeouts. Well, maybe 2 if you just count the sessions I do with Professor Dan Gonzalez on Friday. But yeah, 177 minutes. That's when Donald Trump did nothing from the start of the riots to when he said, go home, we love you. 177 minutes. We're going to see testimony tomorrow, and it's going to be prime time. So it's going to be important. If you're Asian American, you say, I don't need this. Look, we need this as Americans. We need to understand the importance of this as Asian Americans. And we just have to know that January 6th is kind of the dress rehearsal. It's not going away. I mean, this is what is surprising. You had in Wisconsin last week, Wisconsin State Assembly Speaker Robin Vos told WISN TV that he received a call from Trump after the state Supreme Court ruled on July 8th that most absentee ballot drop boxes in Wisconsin are illegal. And, it was the ruling addresses future elections, not the one Trump lost. But Vos says it's very consistent. But Trump called them because he'd like them to do something different in Wisconsin. I explained that it's not allowed under the Constitution. He has a different opinion. And this is Trump trying to do his best to try to overturn the election in Wisconsin in 2020, the one that Joe Biden won. Trump, last week, continued to insist to try to twist an arm. Wisconsin State Assembly Speaker, another Republican, Robin Vos. So you got some good Republicans out there who know the Constitution, respect the Constitution, but you've got a lot of Republicans, some who are even the Maryland Republican, Dan Cox, who won in Maryland, place I used to live. He's an election denier. He won. He continues to be an election denier. We have election deniers all over the nation. This is why January 6th is important. So check it out tomorrow. I'll put something up in the Aldef blog, a new column tomorrow. It's important if you believe in the very thing that most of our forebears, most of our parents, or maybe you're the immigrant, maybe you came here as the immigrant. The reason you came here was for freedom and opportunity. You didn't come here for the lies. All right. One more thing. I know I talk about the All-Star. I was watching the All-Star game, and I have to admit that when the game was exciting, when the outcome was still in doubt, well, I guess it was always in doubt. But the first couple innings, you're in it because the stars, the big stars, Ohtani, and Ohtani had the big smile, and he comported himself well. The rest of the time, it's all stunts. It's all stunts like miking the players. I love Giancarlo Stanton. I love Aaron Judge even more because Aaron Judge comes from 99, which is the heart of California. He's from Linden, California. And I've been to Linden. I've got family in Linden. I love Aaron Judge. I got to be a Yankee fan. But I love the fact that the great players are Stanton and Judge and Juan Soto and Julio Rodriguez. I mean, it's a BIPOC sport. And it's actually pretty diverse. And so it was kind of exciting when, they had the players, because it's a game that really doesn't matter. The stars are there. So you mic them, you have them talk, and you have them talk while they're playing. That was kind of exciting. But, it took away from when there was action. And it was distracting if you still wanted to see the game, right? Yeah, it's good to see Giancarlo Stanton sort of cut it up with Aaron Judge. But there's all sorts of channels. You could have that on the Fox Sports 1 channel, and then on the Fox regular channel, you can have the regular game. Sort of the way they do Monday Night Football. They have the Peyton Mannings, the Manning brothers, cut up about the game on one end, and then you have the game. Actually, I'll tell you, I like just not having any play-by-play and just having it. Because when you go to a game, you don't hear play-by-play. You don't. Unless someone has their radio up loud, but I'd tell that person, hey, put your radio down just to see the sights and sounds of the game. Anyway, there's all sorts of gimmicks that people are talking about. Like, I would like to see a strike zone so that you can correct balls and strikes. And maybe they have challenges on balls and strikes, like 3 challenges for balls and strikes, but it should be fairly clear. There are a lot of blown calls. So anyway, I'm glad that, that the All-Star game was on. Ohtani didn't get the kind. And now this is my beef about Ohtani. They showed him a little bit because he doesn't have the command of the English language as an interpreter. But so they didn't play with him that much. They had him on a little bit, but then they relied on Stanton and Judge and other people who were mic'd, who had a better command of English to get involved. It would have been fun to see Ohtani, and I think that is not necessarily a bias because of race, but maybe a bias because he isn't as great a communicator. The best way that Ohtani communicates is just by smiling, which is nothing wrong there, right? A man's smile, he's engaging, he's relatable, he's the best thing happening in baseball. And I'm just glad that he was there again. And I wish there was some way he could play for the Giants. I just wish there was some way Ohtani could play for the Giants. I'd love for him to play for the Giants. Anyway, the All-Star game. All right. I guess we're getting ready for football next, huh? All right. That's it. That's it for our show. We talked about the All-Star game, Biden's climate emergency. It's an emergency. Look, if you're suffering from the heat, get in. I hope you know, walk into a mall. I know they may not be the safest places, but walk into a mall. Um, Call up your city or county and see if there's some relief stations. I know as a reporter, I have covered the heat in the South, in the Northeast, Texas, and California. Man, it is sad when you get into a situation where people really just aren't able to beat the heat. But hydrate, drink a lot of water. Please take care of yourself. We talked about that violence study. We talked about the hate attack on the San Francisco political person, Gordon Marr, running for re-election. Got people using the term commie pedophile groomer. I mean, it's all QAnon type stuff. And we talked about San Francisco school board racism. If you missed any or all of it, rewind. Use your finger. If you're watching on Emil Amok on Twitter, or if you're watching on the YouTube channel, use your finger and rewind, or move the cursor or whatever they call it, the little ball. Hey, if you're on YouTube, by the way, Emil Guillermo, the YouTube channel, like us, subscribe to us there, like us on Twitter, follow us wherever on Facebook, FB, facebook.com, emilguillermo.media, or go to amok.com. You can see some of my stuff there. So, regular listeners to our show know that we do this to just test our equanimity, to test our ability to withstand the pressures of the world, because ideally we should know this too shall pass. I mean, this too shall pass. We need to feel empowered, and we shouldn't be silent, but we should also know that this too shall pass. It's just one of the things that meditating these last couple of years have taught me about either overreacting or trying to be equanimous to these things so that when they happen, you can respond in the best possible way and not in the reactive way. And the way you do it is by using the equanimity that you gain from meditation. Now, I know it sounds like, oh, that's a bunch of BS. I know it's true. I mean, look, I'm not it goes in waves. I'll yell at people on the phone. I'll yell at software I don't understand. I'll yell at instructions I haven't read. But the way you deal with it is by meditation. And then it will bring you to a level of calmness where you can respond. And I thank all my meditation teachers for showing me that we deal with the idea that this too shall pass. And we deal with our enemies by knowing that, yeah, they are enemies, but we have more in common than not. So I know a lot of people, when they get the news, they see the news and they get angry. They say, that's it. I'm not watching this. I'm turning it off. But I don't know if that's the answer either. I think the answer is understand it. Understand that it comes in waves, and that the state of good that you're feeling and the low point, there's this idea of impermanence. It just never stays the same. It will change, and things will get better. I mean, you just have to believe that. Yeah. I mean, I don't buy that. You have to believe it. No, we'll just see how it works. I mean, in 65, we were like glowing. Hey, the Civil Rights Act is passed. Hey, there's an immigration law. Hey, there's going to be Asian Americans because they get this law passed in 65. We are in 2022. We can't even get a pathway to citizenship for the DACA recipients. Sometimes the wave lasts a little longer. Sometimes it's momentary. But things will change. It's just that you need to know that the struggle is never ending. And it's always a struggle. Whether you win a little bit or lose a little bit, it's always a struggle, moment to moment. And what gets you through? A little bit of self-compassion, a little bit of self-love. That'll help. If you offer it to yourself, you can offer it to others. In time, if you lead with love, a miracle might happen. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Emil, Amok to you. Back again tomorrow, 2 p.m. Pacific, live. Catch us in all the little venues, YouTube. Subscribe. Like us. Twitter, Facebook. Amok.com. Till next time. Mahal Kitai.